There we go. There we got to get. The Committee on Regulatory Reform will now come to order. Madam Clerk, will you take the attendance?
Chair Carter.
Present.
Representatives Liberati.
Here.
Neely. Here. Scott. Here. Young. Here. Grant. McFall.
Here.
Snyder.
Here.
Wilson.
Here.
Mueller.
Here.
Filler.
Yes.
Wenzel. Aragona.
Here.
Beerline.
Here.
Nair.
Here.
Mr. Chair, 14 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll be taking testimony on a few bills today and vote out one later. The first one we're going to take testimony on is House Bill 4965. Representative Andrews. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. HB 4965, the bill you see before you, seeks to maintain the status quo by simply restating the existing exemptions in the franchise fee statute for streaming providers in a clearer manner. Michigan's current law was written before the ubiquity of streaming services back in the early 2000s and contains convoluted language that attempted to capture a definition for a new technology at the time. Recently, law firms and cities in a number of states have begun taking advantage of the convoluted language in state franchise fee statutes like Michigan's by filing class action lawsuits against the streaming companies. These groups are claiming that despite the fact that customers with cable already pay a fee in order to have the cable line put in the street and run to their house, the cities are demanding that people pay for the same line again for their streaming services, and not just one more time. They're being told they must pay a monthly fee for each streaming service. To date, there have been no lawsuits in Michigan, and no lawsuits have been won in any of these other jurisdictions. Instead of hoping that the courts get it right if a lawsuit is filed and going through costly litigation, this bill provides clarifying language that would make it even more clear that the law does not, as it was never intended to, explicitly exempt streaming services. In summary, the bill prevents burdensome new fees on streaming services by closing a loophole that could allow communities to add fees on every subscription video service. In addition, the House bill would not have any current fiscal impact on the state or any local units of government. Thank you, and we're happy to take any questions that the committee might have.
Representative Liberati.
Do you know how many other states have worked on similar legislation?
I believe, you can answer this, but I believe it's been about half a dozen or so.
Mr. Chairman, Scott Ward, I'm a partner at Ora Carrington Sutcliffe, represent DirecTV and Dish Today. Representative, that it's 12 states have passed this statute thus far.
Thank you, gentlemen. Wishing to speak opposing the bill is Michael Watsa he's on Zoom.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Watsa. I represent ProTech, an organization of over 100 communities across Michigan, focused on the right-of-way and those industries who utilize the right-of-way for their businesses, and that includes video service providers. I provided a letter late last night to the committee outlining our thinking, and I'm joined, I believe, this morning by Ian Locke and Tom Norton, who are both in charge of municipal PEG operations in Orion Township and Wyoming and Kentwood. They'll be able to speak directly to the benefits of what they do, and I believe MML and MTA will be joining them as well. I don't want to go back through my letter, but I do want to respond to Representative Andrews' assertions. I worked on PA 480, which was something that the industry, AT&T and Comcast and everybody in the business in 2006 drafted. And I quoted some of it in my letter. I'll just, if you will permit me, I think the language is far from convoluted. I think it's extremely clear, but I suppose if I'm Netflix, I'm going to offer the arguments I can offer. But the language of the statute places the obligation to pay fair rent, what we call franchise fees, for use of the right-of-way by anybody using it. And that certainly includes all the video service providers, and that includes Netflix and anybody else providing video service. And the statute reads, so all video service providers who utilize any, quote, facilities located at least in part in the public right of way without regard to the delivery technology, including internet protocol technology, that would be Netflix coming and streaming over the top. And so the language is exceptionally clear. And certainly everyone understood that streaming was out there at that time and it was going to grow. That was understood. So I don't think there's anything convoluted about that. If you're utilizing any facilities, fiber, copper, in the rights of way, whether they were laid by AT&T or Comcast or Charter or whoever, it doesn't matter. If you're utilizing those facilities under the statute, you owe franchise fees. Something that obviously Netflix has been disputing, and other over-the-top providers. As to the comment by Representative Andrews, who I have nothing but respect for, but I'm sorry, on this bill, I'd just like to say that I think you're mistaken. In the state of Missouri, a group of communities have been winning. They won at the trial court level. Their class has been certified. They won the issues on the summary judgment motion brought by Netflix. They won at the trial court level and at the Court of Appeals. And so that has been successful. And there are issues pending in several other states. And those laws mirror the Michigan law in all respects relevant to this discussion. As to the states that have passed this proposed law by coming from Netflix, 4965, I don't know how many have passed that statute. I heard 12, and that may well be the case. The states that have passed a similar Video Service Act, RPA 480, is in the range of about 25 states. So, as I said in my letter, PA 480, we spent a year and a half negotiating that. And it was all about trying to be fair, to make sure that all video service providers, anybody providing what looks like traditional cable to some of us, anybody who's providing that pays fair rent for use of the right of way. And if they don't, as proposed here, that burden then rests on the taxpayer. And that's really not fair, because then they get the bill for that, plus the bill for their video services, and so on. So this bill, unlike PA 480, which was about fairness, this bill is about unfairness and tilting the table in the favor of one particular group of video service providers. And that concludes my comment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative McFall?
Thank you, Chair. I have a quick question regarding, because you mentioned video services, and where does that actually stop? Would YouTube be included in that? Because there are full movies and TV shows on YouTube. Facebook has videos. TikTok, I mean, there's all sorts of things. What if I connect to my Wi-Fi, which is connecting to my cable line with my phone, and I stream Netflix or any of those other video services? Where does it stop exactly?
The statute's very clear. Any and all video service providers. So, yeah.
Okay. So, and wouldn't that raise prices on the consumer? I mean, because they're not going to eat that.
Well, that is an interesting issue that comes up under even the current Video Service Act when we talk about, okay, how much is the rent? And the comment from the industry has always been, whether it's, you know, the wireline providers or the streamers, that, well, you're going to raise the price on consumers. I would direct your attention to the bill that's been produced here this morning and ask you to identify where it says in that statute that any of the savings that Netflix, I'm not picking on Netflix, but how they'll pass along their savings by not paying rent along to their consumers here in Michigan. That's not in there. And that's typical. So,
Right, but you didn't talk about the ones that offer it for free, like YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. So would that mean they would have to start charging? I mean, if they're being charged something, to me, that means they would have to pass that on somehow.
Well, they pass along the salaries of their CEOs. They pass along the rent for their business buildings. And this rent that they owe to the local communities and the taxpayers who support it otherwise is just another cost of doing business. So yeah, they'd have to pass that along if that's what they choose to do.
Thank you for your testimony. No other questions. We're going to take
You're
a
welcome.
do
Thank
a
you.
quick pivot if we can. I have to get the senators out of here. They have a meeting, so I'm going to call Senator Irwin and Senator Hawk. Would you come up? And we're going to go back to this once you guys are done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm pleased to be joined by Senator Houck up here to advocate for the passage of Senate Bills 179 and 180. These are a couple of bills that passed the House with a big majority last year, but were unable to get across the line in the Senate, and so we've been trying to revive the effort. The effort is really simply to align the cannabis trade that is happening under the Cannabis Regulatory Agency and the trade in cannabis that is happening on tribal lands. Currently, those two systems are in separate silos, and if tribal governments want to sell product into the metric market, into the state market, they're not able to do that, and vice versa. If state cultivators wanted to sell in a tribal dispensary, they're not able to do that. So what this legislation would do is it would allow the Cannabis Regulatory Agency to enter into an agreement with the tribal governments around tax sharing so that those tribal cannabis operations could be a part of Metric, could be a part of the state system, and we'd no longer have two silos but one system for trading cannabis here in Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to hit on a few key points, right now, a tribal entity, if they grow it, process it, and sell it, they're allowed to do that. The only time this will take effect is if they're purchasing from off-site. And what it will do, it will allow the department to negotiate a compact with the tribes, just like we have with sales tax or cigarettes. Second, it requires that the tribes impose a 10% tax or fee on each sale or transfer of marijuana from a tribal marijuana business. The 10% tax matches the current excise tax on marijuana business in the state system. This ensures the tribes are not getting an advantage over other retailers. So basically what it's doing is they're going to have to pay the same taxes that our residents pay on state land or on in cities, and this will make it fair. Thank you.
Are there any other states that have entered into a similar agreement that you know of?
I am not sure. What a question. I'm not sure. I could check on that though and get back with you. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from committee members? No? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Wishing to speak in support is Whitney Gravel from the Bay Mills Indian Community. She's on Zoom.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today before the Regulatory Reform Committee. I am here today on behalf of Bay Mills Indian Community to express our support for the amendments to the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act in SB 179 and 180. To provide a little bit of history, in January 2019, Bay Mills Indian Community followed the state of Michigan in the legalization of marijuana to prevent inequitable treatment of tribal citizens throughout the state. Shortly thereafter, in November 2020, Bay Mills Indian Community also opened the first and only tribally owned marijuana establishment within our reservation boundaries. And we did this in order to diversify economic development and job opportunities for Bay Mills Indian Community. Thereafter, later in 2022, we also opened the first and only tribal grow operation in the state of Michigan, and the operation continues to be community owned. The amendments as proposed would allow for the Cannabis Regulatory Agency and the Michigan Department of Treasury to enter into agreements with tribal nations related to the commercial growing, processing, sale, testing, transportation, and possession of marijuana. In doing so, the subsequent agreements negotiated would finally allow tribally owned businesses access to the state recreational marijuana economy and access to the marijuana enforcement, tracking, reporting, and compliance system, both of which tribal nations have been unable to participate since marijuana was first legalized in the state of Michigan. Furthermore, the amendments would also promote cooperative and safe regulation of marijuana between state and tribal lands. This is actually a model that we have seen across the country. There are tribal cannabis or tribal marijuana compacts in the state of Washington, the state of Oregon, the state of New Mexico, the state of Nevada, as well as many other communities as they have begun to transform and start to engage in the legalization of marijuana. Presently, Bay Mills Indian Community license and regulates our marijuana activity within the jurisdiction of our tribal nation, but we are unable to share that information with the state, nor does the state share any information with Bay Mills. This means that when there's a product issue or a product recall, we are not part of that product recall within the metric system, and we only find out through public notice, and we are also not able to share any information that we may have with the state of Michigan regarding our product. Inclusion of tribal oversight and regulation is very essential to our community and to the state of Michigan to be able to protect public health, welfare, protect the interests of tribal nations and the citizens within Bay Mills Indian Community. We are here simply to ask both of our regulatory systems to be able to speak to each other and ask the Regulatory Reform Committee to support the amendments to the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. And with that, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to provide testimony, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from the committee? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have not wishing to speak in support of the bill, Derek Silva from CRA. Not wishing to speak in support of the bill, Aaron Porter, Grand Traverse Board of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. Not wishing to speak in support, Manny Lentine for Common Citizen. And not wishing to speak in support of the bill, Eric Rodriguez, Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe. Those are the cards. All right. Okay, let's pick up where we left off on House Bill 4965. Wishing to speak, opposing the bill, Tom Norton from WKTV and Ian Locke. Come on up. And I'm looking at the number of cards. Can you kind of summarize it for us so we can make sure that everybody gets an opportunity? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Tom Norton from WKTV Community Media, Wyoming and Kentwood, Michigan. One of the things I just wanted to come to talk about was the real good that these companies paying franchise and PEG fees has done in communities across our state. WKTV is one of the most productive community media facilities in the United States. And one of the reasons we are that is because that support that comes through our cities from those franchise and PEG fees. One of the critical things that WKTV has been able to do is be able to, West Michigan is now entering what's known as a news desert, where one by one news outlets are shutting down, print newspapers are closing. It's very profound in the Metro Grand Rapids area. And many of these PEG stations that are supported by these franchise and PEG fees, they have been able to create hyper-local news services. So the people that live in these communities have some new source of news that they can rely on. And it's we report on crime, we report on a wide variety of activities. And we have only seen our viewership radically increase over the years as more and more print outlets close down. The idea behind franchise fees is that when all of us back out of our driveways to go to work in the morning, we drive on roads that we pay for with our tax dollars. And private corporations like Netflix and YouTube and all the others are wonderful companies, and they provide great services, good value for the money. But they use what we provide for them as the primary means of their doing business. And what we just ask back for that is compensation. YouTube television is now the most watched television network in the United States, and it's all streamed. And so far, there's no payment of franchise or PEG fees from YouTube, nor Netflix, nor any of these streaming services. And as the technology shifts from cable subscriptions to more and more streaming services, we begin to see that this rent, that word has been used, this rent is not being paid back to these taxpayers like yourselves who who build these streets that these companies now use as their primary means of revenue. So I think it's a very key point. Our state government has a constitutional duty to see that this takes place, that this, when the taxpayers provide something, that there's something given back to them. And we know through the 50 years of community television here in the state of Michigan, Michigan is a real leader in community media, and was something to be immensely proud of, all of us, because of the great job that our state legislature has done over the years and our communities have done. And we really, really, truly need to see that continue, especially in light of today, of the greater and greater fractioning of our community that comes about as media becomes more and more sliced. So I yield. If any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I have a quick one, and everybody's beating up on Netflix. So I know that.
It's a great service.
That's the,
I love Netflix.
But as more and more people cut the cord and just use internet to stream,
Right.
and they're paying for internet, is there going to be a fee on top of, say I have Netflix, say I have, Hulu, I've got 4 or 5 different ones. Because, whatever my appetite can sustain, I'll pay for that monthly fee.
Precisely.
Are we trying to raise a monthly fee for consumers
No.
for these services?
Well, from the corporate perspective, they're doing business in our community, and they're utilizing something that the local residents have paid for in order to get that streaming signal to me. The cost it takes them to get that signal to me, i.e. the rent that they would have to pay, is just simply their cost of doing business. I heard Mike say it earlier. There's many costs of their doing business, and this is one of their costs of doing business. And really what's so important is that it's fair. It's fair. They're compensating the local taxpayer for what they're able to use in order to do business.
So I don't want to sound like Denzel in the movie Philadelphia. You got to explain this to me like I'm a 4th grader. Most people out here have no idea.
Right.
And I'm thinking of most college students
Right.
that have free Wi-Fi on campus, that have Amazon Prime,
Right.
Netflix, Tubi. There's all these other ones. Would they have to pay for that? Would there be a charge for them directly?
They would have to, the bill that they received for their streaming service that they utilized would probably have to include, like the way their mom and dad had cable subscriptions, would have to include some sort of franchise and PEG fee as a part of, in this instance with Comcast's cost of doing business in order to get that signal to them for their subscription. It's all part of it. They have employee health care costs, they have salaries, they have the fuel in their trucks. All of it is the cost of doing business.
Thank you for allowing us to take the time to share some information with you guys. I'm Ian Locke, Executive Director at Orion Neighborhood Television and President of the Michigan Community Media Association, or MICMA. When Tom gets on a roll, he gets on a roll, and he's going to cover most of the points I make. But the questions are valid about Tubi. I mean, it is a nebulous situation out there when it comes to streaming, but some of those services are free. You don't have to pay for Tubi. You don't have to pay for straight YouTube. If you want YouTube television, yes, you have to pay, and it looks just like cable TV. They market it as cable TV. It acts like it, and what do we say when it sounds like a duck, looks like a duck? It's pretty much a duck. And so that's where we're concerned with this bill moving forward, to completely wipe the opportunity, or I would even say the idea of even exploring franchise fees for these services in the future, because just you're changing the cable that it's on doesn't mean that the service is any different, or the programming is any different. So that's our main concern. And other points I was going to make today was kind of the impact for the community, like Tom was referring to journalism, and for us it's education. We have interns, career. Every major university in this state of Michigan, we have interns coming in to be journalists, production professionals. We have media literacy classes for everybody from elementary through high school. Some of the money that we collect through franchise fees and PEG fees, we actually grant back to our school districts and townships and libraries for technology upgrades to their facilities. So we're all together working with this, money and the value that's coming in from these services. And we always saw Comcast as a partner. We want people to sign up for cable. We want them to be customers of cable, and AT&T UVerse, right? We work together. We have great relationships with our liaisons. So it's just the impact can be great to a community if we don't at least look at this a little deeper and how it can impact.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Representative Argona.
Thank you, Chairman Washington. Chairman Carter, sorry, you look like one of my favorite actors. Sorry. Just a quick question for you guys. So currently, I just wanted to understand current situation. Comcast and Huawei do pay these fees, but none of these streaming services do, right? So this is not going to be a reduction in revenue. This is, if this bill passes, it's keeping revenue the same as it is now.
Correct.
Well,
go ahead, Tom.
Well,
we have the same
there's
answer.
also the argument that if this bill passes, then the cable companies will come back and claim discrimination, and then they will want to eliminate the whole kit and the caboodle statewide, all franchise fees, all PEG fees, because our competition doesn't have to pay them, and our competition is sending a signal that our competition generates, and our competition charges for that signal the same way we charge for ours, and they're not paying franchise fees, and they're not paying PEG fees, so you're discriminating against us. So,
but and I guess everybody keeps saying Netflix, so I won't pick on Netflix. Hulu, for instance.
Hulu.
If I'm going to stream Hulu, that PEG fee is still being paid by whatever cable company I have because it's their infrastructure on the ground, correct?
No. Currently in the state of Michigan, the only franchise and PEG fees are only paid on cable subscriptions.
Cable TV subscriptions, not internet.
Correct.
I got you. Okay.
Representative McFall.
Thank you. So I do have actually I have two questions if I'm able to. Thank you. If that's all right with the chair.
Go ahead.
Because you just mentioned about only having cable. When I contacted Comcast regarding my internet, they told me it was required that I also have cable. So is that, well,
it's not under state law, certainly not.
Well, yeah, but if that's their policy, then they are still getting a fee because they are requiring that I have the basic cable.
If they are yes, and what Comcast pays is they pay 5% of their cable TV revenue in a franchise fee to each local community. And if you're paying just the basic, they are able to sell you so many other services. And once again, this all goes down to the fact that all those additional services that they might be selling you, okay, and forget Netflix, forget all the others, all those other services, such as even the internet that they provide you, that signal is theirs. They generate that signal. They charge you for that signal. And then they send that same signal down those same wires which go down the street that you pay for. And now they're only giving you franchise only on just that small, tiny, basic cable subscription that they're forcing you to get. So they are, and as we see this migration of cord cutting away from cable TV onto streaming services, onto internet only, what we're seeing is that they are paying less and less in franchise fees for being able to use the same exact street that the taxpayer pays for to send that same exact signal down. And they're just paying less and less and less. It's a great, if I was the board of directors of Comcast, I think that's a great thing. but I'm not, and I'm a resident of the state of Michigan, and I care about my state, and I think the franchise fees for the last 50 years have done an amazing job in building up our community's communication infrastructure, and I can only see it getting better from here, but in order for it to get better, everyone's got to pay their fair share.
Okay. The other question that I have is free services. Like, for instance, if someone's taking online classes, those are often streamed as well. So, like, where does this end exactly is my question, because I feel like this may disproportionately affect low-income households, because if I'm offering a free service, I can't keep it free if I'm paying additional fees.
No, that would not. No, the franchise fees and PEG fees are paid by the provider, Comcast. And what we're looking for is the streaming services, the people that actually market a product that says, we will provide you cable TV, we will provide you internet, we will provide you with movies, we'll provide you with X, Y, and Z. Those people that actually market a service of what they provide in the stream. When it gets down to what you might say you open up a small business where you're going to provide something, you would never have to pay franchise and PEG fees because you're not the originator of the actual stream.
Okay.
And that's what they are. So.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Grant?
Thank you. So I have two quick questions. The first question that I just want to make sure I'm clear on, these streaming services, do they pay a different type of fee to different entities? Are there any fees that could be comparable to this that they're paying now?
I can't speak on that. I don't think so, besides taxes and
they're standard.
That's about it.
You know, the standard cost that they would pay outside of anything having to do with the public right-of-way.
Okay, wonderful. And then as I'm looking at the overview, it's, of course, because these fees aren't being charged, it shows no fiscal impact. But what is the current revenue for the fees that are being collected? And I know you guys aren't with the state, but do you know?
Well, it goes by communities. It goes by each individual community. And what each individual community is pretty much saying across the board, from shore to shore in Michigan, is that franchise fees are dwindling. The rent that they are paying on the public right-of-way is dwindling because this phenomena of technological change, which happens, it's normal, this phenomena of technological change has happened, and people are migrating away from their cable to their streaming services, but they're only paying the rent on cable subscription.
So do we have any figures on what the revenue is for the, no? Okay. I just wanted to check as we talked about maybe
I've heard the possibility of $100 million in revenue for the state of Michigan from paying franchise fees on streaming services, but I'm not an expert on that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess that's why we get testimony. We're going to get to the root of this. Representative Bierland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so if I understand correctly, you collect the fees. It helps not only install the current infrastructure, but keep that infrastructure maintained. I live in an area where we have no infrastructure like this. So I have a Starlink satellite that it beams down and I stream through that. I don't have the infrastructure. I'm not utilizing the infrastructure, but you're going to want me to pay for the maintenance of that infrastructure that doesn't intend to come in my rural area. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, no. To my knowledge.
So you would somehow exempt Netflix on satellite?
Well, it would have to do with the public right of way and how their signal is moving through the right of way. Let's remember one thing. In many instances where they have a transmitter on a telephone pole, that transmitter is still connected to a fiber line underground, which runs along the public right of way. So if you have any public streets in your community, then that would define that you through your taxes maintain, plow, repair, all the kinds of things that require to maintain a public right of way. And once again, they've in many ways, in some technological capacity, they are using that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Also wishing to speak in support of the bill. No, we'll go oppose first. Gary Allison from Waterford Township. Thank you, appreciate it. Wishing to speak in support of the bill is Representative Steele. Oh, she opposes.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak on behalf of opposing the bill. And I am a representative now, but my background is a treasurer and a board member for Orion Township. And one of the committees in which I served on was the Orion Community Cable Committee Commission, OCCCC. And what it was the Cable Commission that took the PEG fees, which is the money that is on the bottom of the cable bills, and these PEG fees went to the local community based on how much and how many cable providers that were in our town. Then this money went to the Cable Commission, and the Cable Commission gave out grants to Orion on TV, which actually was taking videos of all of our public meetings, for our township, our library, our school board, our village. All of them were live streamed by utilizing the grant money in which we provided with these PEG fees. So on a transparency perspective, all the transparency for government was being videotaped with the grants that came from these PEG fees. And as a government person that wants to make sure that we have transpiring of all these committee meetings and making sure that the public is aware of what's going on in our government, this money provided those everything, the microphones, the video cameras, the people that actually took the movies. Oh, and in the schools, I forgot the schools. They did, in the schools, we actually gave grants to the high school for the videography for the schools. So all the productions at the school, all their broadcasting, all their football games, all of that was provided by these PEG fees that were given to the Cable Commission and then granted to on television to be able to provide all these services. So for a community and transparency of government, I am totally in support of this, and I hope that you will oppose this bill. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. Not wishing to speak opposing the bill is Judy Collin. I hope that's some great cursive. From Michigan Townships Association. Allen. Okay. Not wishing to speak opposing the bill, Chris Barnett from Orion Township. Not wishing to speak opposing the bill, Terry Stiles, Oxford Community Television. Not wishing to speak opposing the bill, John Lamacchia, MML. Not wishing to speak in support of the bill, Hamlin Wade from DirecTV. Not wishing to speak in support of the bill, Renee Bivens from Dish Network. Next, we will be taking up testimony on House Bill 4865 from Representative Will Snyder.
Good morning, Chair Carter and fellow committee members. Thank you so much for allowing me to testify this morning on House Bill 4865. If you've spent any time in the west or northwest part of our state, you will surely be familiar with the gas station brand of Wesco. Several months back, I met with one of the owners at their headquarters in my district in Muskegon Township, and I'm happy to say that J.J. Westgate is here this morning joining me to testify. In that meeting, I learned of this issue that this bill addresses: onerous regulations that only specifically designated distributor licenses or SDD license holders that operate motor vehicle fuel pumps are forced to comply with. Current law requires that only SDD license holders who sell motor fuel must maintain an additional $250,000 inventory stock requirement, not including alcohol or gasoline. Many Wesco stores and many other small gas station retailers often hold well over $100,000 in stamps or rolling paper to meet this threshold in order to have their liquor license. This legislation would simply eliminate the inventory requirement. It is nothing more than an unnecessary bureaucratic red tape that doesn't serve a public good. The Michigan Liquor Control Commission would also no longer have to do time-consuming and expensive inventory checks, giving them more bandwidth to focus on other enforcement activities. It is important to note that the bill would not increase the number of SDD licenses available. Additionally, none of the other requirements for an SDD license would be altered in any way that would lessen the Liquor Control Commission's ability to ensure properly credentialed retailers receive a license. The proposed substitute that is here today for consideration removes other references to the stock requirement in motor vehicle fuel pumps for SDD license holders that were omitted from the introduced bill, creating parity on SDD licenses. Gas stations and small business owners are signaled out as the only retailers required to keep certain inventory requirements. Smaller gas stations are unfairly prevented from obtaining or are facing significant inventory barriers in order to obtain liquor licenses. My bill is simply about removing barriers and bureaucratic red tape, ensuring parity for SDD license holders. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this issue this morning, and I look forward to gaining your support on House Bill 4865. First, I'd like to introduce Mark Griffin, who is the president of the Michigan Petroleum Association and Michigan Association of Convenience Stores.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you, Representative Snyder, for this opportunity to speak to you today. The Michigan Petroleum Association and the Michigan Association of Convenience Stores has about 120 petroleum wholesalers, and we represent also all the 5,000 gas station convenience stores throughout the state of Michigan. We employ about 15,000 people statewide. We're in every county, we're in every district throughout the state. We're family-owned small businesses. We're truly neighbors serving neighbors. We strongly support House Bill 4865. Before I go into some of the reasons which the representative covered, I'll try to be brief so that we don't get too repetitive, Mr. Chairman. But basically, I've been with the MPA for over 30 years. This has been on the books even before I came along. It used to be on the books for a beer and wine license. That was removed back in 2016. But it has continued on for the spirits license, otherwise known as an SDD. We're the only industry that has to keep this inventory requirement at our location if you're going to sell spirits. If I was to start a liquor store today, I wouldn't have to do it, but as soon as I put gas pumps out front, I would. It's terribly unfair that we're being singled out and continue to be singled out in this manner. Ultimately, as the representative said, we aren't asking for more licenses. We strictly want to remove the $250,000 inventory requirement. If you look at the legislation, it looks very complicated, and that's because over so long, for so many years, the liquor code has become very convoluted. So all we want to do is take that out, and the language that is presented to you today does that. So I'll be here for questions, obviously, but I really want you to hear from J.J. Westgate from Wesco, one of our members, constituent of the representatives. So, J.J.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, representatives. So to give you a real world of where we're at, my name is J.J. Westgate. I'm a third-generation owner of Wesco Convenience Stores. We operate 55 convenience store gas stations throughout western Michigan. We're predominantly west of Grand Rapids. We go north to Benzonia, south to Watervliet, Coloma. We employ approximately 1,500 associates throughout these locations, and we have beer and wine licenses at 55 of our locations. So all of our locations sell beer and wine. Only 40 of them are able to sell liquor. Of the 40, 18 of them are subject to the $250,000 inventory requirement. We would like to be able to sell liquor at all of the locations, but because of the inventory requirement and the fair market value of licenses, it's cost prohibitive to do that. When we could take the inventory that's required to get to the 250,000 and invest it in, electronic vehicle charging stations or new facilities to service new communities or better ways to provide, or other benefits we could provide to our associates. So from our standpoint, it's really an unfair provision that seems to target gasoline stations for some reason that predates me. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Filler.
Thank you. And I've never been in the business, so you guys will have to teach me a little bit. These licenses, are they transferable? Are they worth something? I mean, what happens once you have a license? And why are you the ones who, sorry, I guess it's two questions. And why, what's the purpose of the minimum inventory requirement? Those are my two questions. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, they are transferable. If you want to transfer a license, you would have to sell it. And then depending on the rules that the liquor control has set out, that'll dictate where it could be transferred to. Right.
And
now,
what's the value? I mean, is that just like a piece of paper, or is it like $100,000?
it depends on the market that you're in. We've paid as much as, I want to say, $175,000 for one, and we've paid as little as $25,000 for one.
Oh, okay.
So it really depends where you're at. And the second question I believe you asked was about the
Yeah, why is there, what is the purpose of a minimum inventory requirement?
I don't know the answer to that question. Like I said, that would predate me. I can't think of a good reason for it.
Is it like a quality control? I mean, I'm just trying here. And if it predates you, then
It predates, wow. Yeah, it does.
Catching strays here.
Yeah, it predates me. I believe, going back and trying to look at the literature, at one time there was an effort to exclude gas stations from selling alcohol.
Okay.
It was also an effort, basically, it's protectionism. If that's the business you're in, one way to cut out a big swatch of your competitors is to get legislation passed that makes an onerous inventory requirement. So now that we have been able to sell beer and wine since 2016 in all gas stations without an inventory requirement, if you sit through any of the liquor control hearings, we're the good guys in the neighborhood. We're the ones who are training staff, we're carding everyone, we're doing our job. So that's where we think this is coming from, and it's time to level the playing field and be fair to us, just like we're fair to anyone else who wants to sell spirits.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks, Representative.
I have Rep. Grant who has a question, but I also see we have Dave Martin from Liquor Control that may want to come clarify some things for me, if you would, once Representative Grant asks her question.
Okay, I want to preface my question by saying that we haven't had issues with Westco at all, but I know that in my community, gas stations selling alcohol have been sometimes a problem. And so with this legislation change, would this make it easier for a gas station to obtain a liquor license? I understand that still the number available is the number available. You're not asking for an increase, but could it cause us to see a higher concentration, like people have easier access to those licenses?
I think that might be a question that Dave could answer better, because he understands the relationship between existing licenses and quotas better than I do. Our research, just talking to our members, the 5,000 gas station owners that are out there, that there's a good 40% that don't want to carry liquor at all. And depending on the community, there's some communities that they absolutely do. They don't even want to carry tobacco. So, in your community, is it possible? Sure, the inventory requirement would no longer be there for them to have an STD license. Whether you would see an increase at gas stations, I think it will have to do with whether there's even license available. We aren't asking to change the quota. We're just saying treat us like everyone else, not have to, it's unfair that we have to pay this and no one else does. If they aren't following the law right and they are selling to people that they shouldn't sell, by all means, we want the department to crack down on those people and either take their license away or make sure that they're doing it right. That's what we enforce internally and talk to our members about almost every day.
Thank you. Dave, did you want to say a few words? We've got a short leash. We got to get out of here. We got to vote on something. But if there's something that you want to add, we'd appreciate it.
I had not planned on saying anything, but I can, if you're okay, Mr. Chair, I could answer the two questions that.
Sure, take a
you
couple
members
minutes.
had.
And
Representative Grant, yes, the quota in these municipalities for SDDs many times are already full. So it would be, in some cases, the quota is actually what we call over quota, where population over the years has decreased enough. We don't take licenses away if there's already been issued, but it gets to a point where we can't issue anything new. So there would have to be something that would find an SDD within the county to purchase that and then move it there. So where they talk about between 25 and 175,000, I think they've seen for licenses, it could be just cost prohibitive to even get a license like that. Furthermore, there are a number of municipalities throughout the state that have their own local ordinances that prohibit or have limits on gas stations with serving alcohol. The Liquor Control Commission in our code and rules specifically says, we're giving you a license, but you still have to comply with all the local ordinances and zoning. So if you can't get an occupancy permit or permission from the local government unit because of that, our license only says that that is good within those the confines of that. And then for Representative Filler, you asked when did this come from? I've done a lot of research on this. It actually started in the late 70s. Ironically, it was when a lot of gas stations still had their own repair shops, and there were changes in licensure for having a repair shop, and you had to have a significant amount more qualifications to rent a repair shop. You couldn't just be somebody who tinkered around with automobiles. And a lot of these shops, a lot of these gas stations had excess space that they converted into convenience stores. And the Grocers Association at the time had some concerns about the competition, and Michigan, or the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, had concerns about alcohol being sold while you're stopping to get gas and the possibility of driving. So that's where some of that comes in. But it really this came into place back in the 70s when that change went from gas stations with repair shops to gas stations with convenience stores.
Thank you. You have a question, Rep. Young? Yeah. Really quick. Yeah.
Thank you. You answered my question, so thank you for that. But I did want to know, because I don't know if I missed this, was there any conversation opposed to just totally removing the requirement to altering and changing the $250,000 requirement? Just curious about that.
The conversations I've had have been to eliminate the requirement because nobody else has to meet that requirement. So when my local folks came to me, that was what I said I would pursue.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Not wishing to speak in support of the bill is Tim Langholz from NFIB. Next, we are going to we have to do. Okay, great. Next, we're going to vote out House Bill 4647 to change the frequency of barbershop and barber college inspections. Madam Clerk, I need a motion. Motion by, man, it's one of those days. Filler.
Yes. Chair Carter?
Yes.
Representatives Liberati?
Yes.
Neely?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Young?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
McFall?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
Wilson?
Yes.
Mueller?
Yes.
Filler?
Yes.
Wenzel?
Yes.
Aragona?
Yes.
Beerline?
Yes.
Nyer?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 15 yeas, 0 nays, 0 passes. House Bill 4647 is reported with recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I also need an approval and adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting on September 19th. Representative Liberati makes that motion. Seeing no absent members and no further business, we're adjourned.